For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Sashnee Moodley. Researcher and analyst Professor Raymond Suttner joins me to discuss a bad week for Zuma and could it be his last? Welcome, Professor.
Thank you.
Now, this has been a bad week for Zuma. How do you see things unfolding?
I think that it's a week where through the courts and through demonstrations, people have been trying to reclaim the democratic values and the constitutional values on which the 1994 settlement was based. And the throwing out of the it started with the throwing out of the charges against Pravin Gordhan, Ivan Pillay and Obama Khashoggi. And what I think is significant is that people are now asking whether Shaun Abrahams is a fit and proper person to be head of the NDPP. Now, he is a fit and proper person for the purposes which motivated Jacob Zuma in appointing him. What he has wanted as head of the NPA from the time of his ascension to the presidency in 2009 is a person who will shield him from prosecution for the 783 charges that were withdrawn by Mokotedi Mshe in 2009. And the first person he appointed was removed by the courts, Menzies Simelane, as not being fit and proper to hold such an office because he told lies, things like that. Now, Zuma may not find that so offensive that you tell lies, but the problem is that people took it to a court which found that to be offensive. For a long time, you had Nomgcobo Jiba acting as head, and they prevented an appeal, the appeal of the DA to get the tapes on which partly the decision to withdraw the charges was based. They prevented them from getting those tapes, and it went all the way up to the Supreme Court of Appeal. And at the level of the Supreme Court of Appeal, they conceded to the court that they actually had no legal basis to withhold it. So taxpayers' money was spent on appeals all the way up there, and they conceded they didn't have the right. Now, since, as I said in the other interview that I did today, if the court decides today in relation to the state capture report that Zuma is personally liable for the costs, that type of delaying tactic is not going to work anymore. We would never have had to fork out that money over the spy tapes. And that has implications for the future. It's also a week when members of the Hawks and the bodyguard of Tom Moyane are about to face charges for holding hostage a person who would not give them a document. What was the document saying? The document was saying that the lawyer of SARS had, for ethical reasons, he was not prepared to associate himself with the prosecution of Gordhan. Likewise, the person they held hostage, Flock Symington, had himself written a legal opinion in relation to Ivan Pillay's retirement, where he said there was no objection to this. Now, what was interesting about all of this is that you don't bring a prosecution for a criminal offence like fraud or theft unless there's animus, in other words, criminal intent. They clearly had not done their homework about what had been done before. They were not able to establish that the parties who were charged had the intention to commit a crime. Even if it were irregular, which they've not even been able to show, even if it had been irregular, there has, in addition for a criminal offence, to be intention to commit a criminal offence, and they were not able to show that. So you have a situation since then where that happened, the withdrawal of the case. There was also the withdrawal of the case against Robert McBride, and then the withdrawal of the President's attempt to interdict the state capture report. Now, in all of these cases, what you have is a battle between those who defend the Treasury from looting, and on the other hand, that is not only Gordhan, but when these people were in SARS, Pelé, etc., you have Ipert and Dramat, Dramat having been involved in prosecution of people who were involved in allegedly involved in fraudulent activities, and you have the state capture report, which reveals pillaging. So you have, on the one hand, those who want a free hand, aided by the prosecutorial authority and the hawks, instead of a prosecuting authority directing its eyes and its weaponry towards those who are committing crimes. And the hawks doing this actually directed their artillery against those who were defending state resources. Now, the other issue that arises is that the NPA has been reluctant to prosecute Gordhan, not only under Jiba, but when Sean Abrams became head of the NPA, when he promoted Jiba. Jiba since then has been disbarred as an advocate. She's appealing that, but at the moment she's disbarred. And they have taken on appeal the decision of the North Gauteng High Court reinstating the charges. Now, the problem for Zuma, and Zuma is also taking it on appeal. Problem for Zuma is that the state capture, the North Gauteng High Court is waiting to make a decision on costs, and unless he provides good reasons why it should not happen, he may be personally held liable for the costs of the case. And this is an important deterrent for the future. If the Supreme Court of Appeal should decide to agree with the North Gauteng High Court, which is likely, that the charges must be reinstated. On the one hand, having been ridiculed the way the NPA is now ridiculed over their prosecuting the wrong people, they may feel they're obliged to try to make an effort to prosecute the president, whether he's in office or out of office. And for the president to deal with this, he would have to pay personally. And if he tries to challenge that decision by going to the Constitutional Court, he would also have to pay personally. So the whole pattern has relied in the past on spinning it out at taxpayers' expense. And the support for a particular type of succession to Zuma, in other words, not favouring Ramaphosa on the part of the Premier League, so-called Premier League, and supporting Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, was based on an assumption, which may or may not be true, that she would be less likely to allow a prosecution to proceed if she were president. Now, it's not so easy any longer to prevent a prosecution, because we are seeing now that Sean Abrams is under massive attack for failure to apply his mind in good faith to the prosecution of Zuma, and any attempt to evade prosecuting Zuma if the charges are reinstated through the Supreme Court of Appeal may lead to similar upheaval. So the power of a president to intervene by appointing people who are lackeys, like many people say Sean Abrams is, power to do that is not really there anymore. And all of this affects the future of Zuma as president and the possibility of his being removed. What does Zuma do now? Does he resign? Does he try and make a deal? You know, I see one of the articles in the Conversation today by Roger Southall says that they mustn't offer him amnesty. I'm not sure how they can offer him amnesty unless he has already been convicted. And the DA and the EFF and the others will not agree to, even if they had the powers, but it's out of their hands. The Judicial Commission on the state capture report may recommend charges, and that's a process that's out of the hands, really, of the president. His power to influence is very limited, and now the power to misuse on the part of the NPA is diminished.
On Wednesday, there were nationwide demonstrations calling for Zuma to resign. Do you think he will heed these calls?
You see, some of them were calling for him to resign, but some of them were also saying, as ANC veterans, they want to sit down with Zuma, discuss the problems, all of this. Now, I personally don't understand that reasoning. I am an ANC veteran, but I don't really see what there is to discuss with Zuma. Zuma must just go, and in fact, he may well have to go to jail. And I don't see why he must be engaged. He's not in good faith. He's responsible for the problems that we have. He needs to be removed. The problem that the ANC has, however, is to agree on someone to take his place, although it may be easier to remove this now for the reasons that I've mentioned, in that the question of reinstitution of charges, preventing the reinstitution of charges, may be something they can't intervene to prevent, whether as president or whatever it is, because of the developments this week. So the importance of the demonstrations is it shows the level of anger in the country. It also has a political significance for the ANC in that if they cherish the hope of returning to power in 2019, if they cherish the hope of returning in 2019, what's been happening this week doesn't bode well for them. And the way some of their people behaved in 3 metros in the last week, assaulting people, things like this, also shows that they're not reconciled to defeat. And one must also take note of that, because what does it mean for 2019 if they lose? And that, in my view, means that people beyond the ANC must be ready to defend their democracy, especially if the ANC is reluctant to concede defeat, should it be defeated in 2019. But beyond that, there's another question for me, and that I raised in the article, and that is, we need to have a vision which guides us in the post-Zuma period. Many of the people who are involved in bringing Zuma down have not really put on the table what was wrong with the Zuma period. And I think we've got to articulate a vision that we agree on, which seeks to remedy the range of things that were wrong with this period. It's not just in Kandla or the Guptas. It's a whole lot of questions relating to violence, to dishonesty, lack of integrity of a range of types. We've got to have a state that is run on the basis of integrity, and we've got to agree on that. And I think we've got to build relationships beyond, not excluding the ANC, but beyond the ANC in order to advance this for the future.
Thank you, Professor. That was Professor Raymond Suttner speaking to Creamer Media's Polity about a bad week for Zuma and could it be his last.